When it comes to Halo, it seems like throughout the course of Halo's existence, there's always been a vocal community around whatever Halo game is out at the moment, complaining about how the current Halo isn't as good as the previous Halo. While Halo 3 is my personal favorite Halo game of all time, I'd be lying to myself if I don't remember clearly back in the Halo 3 days, people talking about how Halo 3 wasn't nearly as good as Halo CE or Halo 2, and there's still people who hold these beliefs to this day. I do think it is really interesting and important for just the Halo community to maybe understand why some people might have a different opinion when it comes to something as trivial as Halo 3. So today we wanted to talk about why some people hated Halo 3. The first complaint that is really prevalent whenever you go back to forum posts from around when Halo 3 initially released, and especially from when the Halo 3 beta came out, there were actually people complaining seriously about how they felt like the graphics and the art style with Halo 3 wasn't all that great of an improvement over Halo 2. Now this is very odd looking back now, especially with how much time I've spent in Halo 2 and Halo 3. It seems very clearly that Halo 3's graphics are the better looking graphics because of the technology that was available back then. Of course, I've experienced a lot of Halo 3 more recently on MCC, which does look really great. But while I disagree that graphically speaking, Halo 3 was worse than Halo 2, I think for the most part, this perspective from different players who felt like Halo 3's graphics weren't as good as Halo 2's might come more so than people arguing about how there weren't many drastic visual changes between Halo 2 and Halo 3 in the same way there were drastic visual changes between Halo CE and Halo 2. If you look at Halo 1 and Halo 2 graphically and compare them, it's like night and day. However, by the time Halo 3 rolled around, they had kind of already came up with a system of how things were supposed to look in the Halo universe, and Halo 3 does hold on to that quite a bit. Master Chief doesn't have a brand new helmet. The Warthogs mostly look the way that they looked in Halo 2. And while this one is often overlooked, while a lot of the set pieces in Halo 2 looked great, Halo 3 not only had great skyboxes, but also added a lot of living elements to the skyboxes, whether it's banshees flying in the distance or just stuff happening far away that made it feel more alive that probably could be overlooked here as well. It also probably doesn't help that Halo 2 had one of the largest arrays of varying locales you could experience throughout the campaign and multiplayer levels, and Halo 3 was kind of this new game on the block that did bring some beautiful maps to the table, but attempting to stand out over what Halo 2 did with its maps is a challenging feat to say the least. But that was just scraping the surface of some of the complaints that people had. A lot of people looked into the campaign for Halo 3, which was the campaign that was supposed to end the Halo trilogy, where players got to finish the fight, and some people, especially fans who loved the Halo 2 campaign, maybe felt a little bit tilted when it came to some of the characters that had some interesting stories in Halo 2 that ended up getting backseated a bit when it came to Halo 3. For instance, characters like the Shipmaster, Miranda Keyes, and the Prophet of Truth did have some interesting moments kind of moving in the background of the Halo 2 narrative. Though with the pacing that went into Halo 3, these characters really didn't have all that much time to grow or go much further than what we saw in Halo 2. The Arbiter probably took the biggest hit out of all of this because the Arbiter obviously was a central character to Halo 2, and in Halo 3 he's definitely kind of put on the sideline for a large portion of the story. While it's great that player 2 gets to play as the Arbiter and he gets to kind of chill there in the background in some of the cutscenes while other stuff's going on, he definitely doesn't get the attention he had in Halo 2. He does, of course, get to at least complete his story arc and get that revenge against the Prophet of Truth, but outside of that fleeting moment, yeah, I can agree to an extent that the Arbiter didn't get nearly the amount of attention that he probably should have gotten if they kept up with the Halo 2 level of attention. And while we feel like we can agree with some of these points here, we also feel that Halo 3 was kind of intended to be the climax of the story, which means it had to be the most action-packed game to date. And while we would have loved to see more story and characters, there probably would be some concern, though it would mean stepping aside to some of the most exciting events to ever happen in the Halo trilogy not happening in Halo 3, and it would maybe make Halo 3 not feel like a conclusive enough finale. Halo 3 is like the ultimate crescendo to the Halo trilogy, and with its fast pacing that it has to have here, it kinda just wraps up the stories and lets Halo 2 stand out for the game that developed the characters. And I think that can be a good thing also, as it makes Halo 2 stand out for having the most character development, and Halo 3 stands out for kind of tying off all of the ends and plot elements that were started way back in Halo CE. And while we don't have as many awesome moments from some of the characters we would have liked to see, whenever these characters did show up and do something, it mattered and it was impactful. Just like the line that the shipmaster has here.
Group ships, staggered line. Shipmaster, they outnumber us 3-1.
Then it is an even fight.
He doesn't have very many lines in Halo 3, but if you can see here, the line that he does get is pretty badass, and that's kind of the approach it seems like they took with Halo 3. Now, for character development, they did focus a bit on Cortana and this relationship with the Gravemind, and it's all good, it's interesting, though the annoying interruptions throughout the campaign definitely were a point of contention against various Halo communities, as it can be kind of annoying when you're just trying to do something. Another interesting difference when it comes to Halo is definitely the removal of boss fights in Halo 3's campaign. It seemed like with Halo 2, there was always some sort of mission or boss that would kind of pop up from time to time, whether it was the first Scarab you encounter, fighting the Heretic, to actually battling out one of the Prophets, and then the battle with Tartarus at the end of Halo 2. They were all really monumental encounters, and it seems like Halo 3 kind of went the route of just, making you take out some Scarabs a couple of times, and then doing it again. And then they do finally give you one final boss fight against Guilty Spark, and it's really, really easy. It's almost a playable cutscene, to be honest. However, we'd argue that the ending driving sequence is a really cool callback to the first Halo, and it definitely is this huge and epic triumphant moment to close off the Halo trilogy. But the cutscene right after that does kind of vaguely wrap things up, and it is understanding how some people made the argument back in the day that Halo 3 had an anticlimactic ending, because you try to put together what's going on in that cutscene, especially without it being on Legendary, and you just had the shorter ending where they're like, yeah, Chief probably died or something, and yeah, but the war's over. Okay. Definitely raised a lot of eyebrows for people across the board. As far as the campaign's enemies are concerned, there was a major shift there as well. Of course, now the main focus was fighting against brutes, which was something introduced at the end of Halo 2, but some people did miss fighting elites, and since they were completely removed out of the game in the regards to being an enemy, they're of course your allies in a couple of levels, some players weren't really a fan of the way the brutes were as the main enemies rather than the elites. However, we do have to give credit to Bungie here, because if you play Halo 2 and you fight against the brutes, and you fight against the elites, and then you play Halo 3 and fight against the brutes, you can see that in a way, Bungie took a lot of the elements from the elites and incorporated them into the new brutes that were kind of the main enemies throughout Halo 3. A lot of the newer brutes kind of take the same amount of damage for their armor to fall off as an elite in Halo 2 maybe would. So there definitely were some interesting similarities between the way that the Halo 3 brutes were handled. But we do understand how some people just really liked fighting against elites more than brutes. Also, this one's a little odd because it seemed like a lot of people weren't fans of flood levels in Halo CE and Halo 2, though there was the community that was vocally upset that there were less flood levels in Halo 3, with there really only being 2.5 real major levels where you're just fighting the flood, and then there's some small encounters here and there. It's a fair argument, but when it comes down to it, it's one of those opinion things. Personally, Floodgate stands out because it is one of the coolest levels in Halo 3, and I think by just saving the flood for specific moments that are crafted so differently made them more fun experiences than kind of getting tired of the flood constantly.
Hey guys, Luke here. While I was editing this, I realized there was one more part I wanted to add right here in campaign, which is that Halo 3 introduced 5 new weapons, which on paper doesn't sound bad since Halo 2 also introduced 6 new weapons, but out of the weapons they introduced, there was only 2 really good ones, with the other ones kind of feeling meh, like the flamethrower, the mauler and the spiker were kind of dog. to be honest. And there's a lot of people who complained about that back in the day.
On the multiplayer side of things, there was also a lot of complaints. Of course, one of the big ones that I heard about a lot was people really missing Blood Gulch, because Blood Gulch was that iconic level from Halo CE and Coagulation in Halo 2. And then there was other maps also that were in Halo 1 and Halo 2 that just didn't exist in Halo 3, like Beaver Creek. And while Valhalla was an okay level, and there was other good levels in Halo 3, there were some beautiful levels in Halo 3. You can understand how some of the nostalgia of having these old levels not included in the new entry when they were kind of staples of Halo could be off-putting to some longtime fans. Matchmaking would also see a huge overhaul on how ranks worked. This would be a really heavy blow to the ultra competitive community that loved Halo 2's rank system. It was a really big deal back then, getting to that max rank and holding it and just having that number by whatever rank you were. You were really proud of your rank back then. And the way that Halo 3 implemented kind of an individual playlist ranking system that had you level up in a much different fashion, it just wasn't nearly as popular from the people that liked the Halo 2 rank system. It's probably why people continued to play Halo 2 up until Xbox Live was shut down in 2010. Now, there were some people who complained a little bit about how multiplayer ended up balancing out some of the weapons, which did see a lot of big weapon changes that kind of changed up the gameplay altogether. For instance, there were no more dual-wield needlers, though needlers were really overpowered in Halo 3 anyways. Swords no longer could let you just free fly across the map however you wanted to. Little things like a BR reload animation cancel didn't work the same way.
And another thing that I remember a lot of people accusing Halo 3 of is that it was more multiplayer focused instead of being story focused. And yes, this might be a weird thing now that back in the day, video games were just hated on for including a multiplayer, and it's even weirder because Halo always had a multiplayer included, but I do remember that people said Halo 3 is less story focused and more of a multiplayer game.
But like we said, we loved Halo 3. We have a very hard time accepting critical reception when it comes to Halo 3 just because of how much we liked the game. Though we do feel like a lot of these points we included were valid criticisms and valid opinions coming from the community, but we'd like to know what you guys think, of course, and if you guys liked Halo 3 or if you had things about Halo 3 you really didn't like. But hey, after all of that, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos just like this one, and you won't miss anything we upload, even if YouTube's acting all whack. Also, if you want to, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Rocket Elijah, or you can follow Luke at Rocket Sloth Luke. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye, guys.